Hi, my name is Jeff Rothschild, and I'm going to share some of my experience using technology as a sports dietitian. First, a bit of background about me. I'm a registered dietitian. I've been a registered dietitian since 2014. Most of that time was spent in Los Angeles, working with people and specifically athletes in an individual one-on-one basis. And then I moved to Auckland, New Zealand in 2019, where I still work with people, but I'm mostly doing my PhD looking at pre-exercise nutrition beliefs and practices of endurance athletes. So I'm excited to share some of what I do both in my practice and as in my research with you today. So we'll talk about a few different types of technology that I use, starting with Excel sheets, and we'll move into Google Docs, and then we'll talk about how I use the R programming language, and finally some of the aspects of technology used in research. So to start with race day plans. So what I'm going to do is, again, just kind of show you different things. Maybe we'll go a bit quickly, but I want to give you a broad overview of what I do. So starting with the plan looks something like this. And here's the template I might start from. So I can start with the person's weight in pounds or kilograms. And it started with a general goal per hour. So let me take a step back. This might be for a triathlon. And let's say it's, or just like a long bike ride. Maybe someone's going on a 5 or 6 hour bike ride, or they're training for an Ironman or something like that. So they want to figure out what to eat. So let's just say it's a 3 hour bike ride. And I start out with these goals that are based on, in this case, 10 milliliters per kilogram body weight and roughly 70 grams an hour. As you probably know, this can really vary all over the place, so I can adjust this on the fly, but it gives me a starting place. And on this Excel sheet, I have a list in the back, which is like a lookup table with not every product, but kind of the main ones that people tend to use. So what I can do then is if someone says, oh, I like to use, let's say, Scratch hydration, I have that here, and it can be either 1 scoop or stick pack or 1.5 scoops. And forgive me for thinking about it in ounces. Most of the people I work with are in the U.S., so we might have 22 ounces in a typical bottle, or it's about 600 mils. And so we can just copy and paste that, and that populates. And the things I care about are calories, total carbohydrates, and the mix of glucose and fructose, or equivalents, and sodium. And so I might feel like, oh, this person needs to have at least 3 bottles of Scratch, which is just, again, it's just a typical sports drink. And then they might want to use some gels. So let's just say they like using goo gels. So I can just pop that in there, and then we can kind of figure out, okay, across 3 hours, 70 might even be high. This could get you where you need. Maybe I add in a little bit of water. Sometimes if they might just leave out with 3 bottles and then they can only refill. So anyway, you see where I'm going with this. This can expand out to a full, Ironman race plan that might be anywhere from, 8, 9 hours to 14 or 15 hours. On the right, I can kind of give this, sometimes I'll give them this to cut out and put on their bike tube. So they can figure out, okay, from miles 5 to 20, I need to have bottle 1 and bottle 2 and 3 and so on, and have a pack of chews there, or whatever it is. We can give them a plan. I'll typically also split it out between a bike, swim bike, and then run. So anyway, that's one thing that I use quite a lot. And also a sweat rate calculator I'll sometimes use, where I can just give them this, and again, I have it set in pounds or kilograms. They can put in their starting weight, ending weight, how long the exercise duration was, how much fluid they consumed, and then it'll calculate out the sweat rate and how much % body weight loss. And I'll give this to someone, and they can do this a few times to just get a sense of what they're doing. And I also might take a similar approach to giving someone a carb load guide. So if someone wants to understand what a carb load should look like, and most people think just adding more food by adding more carbs, but you also have to tailor back the the fat and protein so that their calories don't go through the roof. So I have basically the same kind of sheet where I have most of the common foods in a lookup table, and I can just go through and adjust this fairly quickly on the fly with someone to give them a sense and normalized on their body weight and what I think their goals are to come up with a fairly quick carb load plan for them. Now, switching gears to kind of more day-to-day tracking, I often use Google Docs because it's obviously a nice way for me to see what someone's doing and for someone to just to kind of stay in touch. And I use this a lot for calorie and carbohydrate tracking. So I'll show you a few examples of what I do with that. So here's an example of Google Sheet that I use. We can see it looks like there's a lot going on here, but basically we have the date. So for each day, the person will put in their number of calories burned during exercise, and if she works out twice a day, there'll be 2 workouts. So we'll have a total training calorie burn. And based on that, I can create a daily calorie goal, a daily carbohydrate goal, and then she can put in her actual intake, actual calorie intake, and actual carbohydrate intake. Then I can track her calorie intake and her carbohydrate intake versus her calorie burn, and we see a nice, matching, or fairly close matching of her intake. This was a big issue before I started working with her. She was not matching at all. If anything, she was kind of like all over the place. So this way we can see, a nice, fairly tight relationship. And then I can also see the plan versus actual carbohydrate and calorie intake. And now, how do I plan that? Well, the goals come from a formula. So it'll be her total training calorie goal, total training calorie burn, times this slope. So basically, if you remember your linear regressions, it is just a simple linear regression. So we have the slope and an intercept. So on a day where there's 0 calories being burned, like these future days, the goal will be 1,750 calories, and then it's the slope, so 0.75 times her calorie burn. So basically, she's eating, we're planning 1,750 calories plus 0.75, 75% of her exercise calorie burn. And so that's just a simple formula. And if I want to change that over time, I can do that. If I feel like, oh, well, maybe the off days need to be higher or lower, and the workout days needs to come up, I can play with the slope and the intercept to create these different goals. And the same thing with carbohydrate. The carbohydrate is a little bit different. That is, what do I have there? It looks like, I have a polynomial linear regression, but same idea. We have an intercept, so on no workout days, she'll have 150 grams, and then 0.16 times her training calorie burn. Now, one other example where I do it, this is someone who works out more times, so sometimes up to 4 workouts in a day. So we use a training load metric, which is a session RPE on a scale of 0 to 100 times duration in minutes, and that gets what's called a training load. And then we have the total training load for the day. So then based on that, again, we'll have a daily training calorie goal, a carb goal, then I can see your actual and planned intake. So again, this allows a better matching. In this case, the polynomial value is, you see how it goes up and then it kind of levels off a bit. Now, whether or not that's optimal, that's just kind of what she feels best with, so I've kind of built it into the equation. The calorie intake versus training load is a straight line, and in her case, it's 2,600 calories on off days and then 1 calorie. So in this case, we're matching every calorie burned. Now, the next area we'll get into is using the R programming language. If you haven't heard of that, it's essentially, just think of like computer coding. It's definitely a steep learning curve, but it's unbelievably powerful. So it really helps me analyze research, also find insights, and build apps like I'll show you in a second here. So one of the ways, just finding insights, here's an example. This is an athlete, very recreational athlete, but her main issues at the time were low energy, sugar cravings, and she wanted to lose weight. So anytime I hear low energy in the afternoon and kind of sugar cravings, I always think of protein first. And so what I had her do is track her protein, her grams of protein at lunch, you see here, and then she would rate her afternoon energy levels on a scale of 1 to 5, and then her afternoon craving levels on a scale of 1 to 5. And you see by the dashed line, which is the best fit line across these, there's no relationship between how much protein she had at lunch and her afternoon energy levels, or her afternoon cravings. Or a very slight decrease in afternoon cravings with more protein, but it's not, it's all over the place. But what you'll notice here are these green triangles and purple circles. And in this case, I had her also make sure to be outside for at least 15-20 minutes in the morning in the sun. Didn't have to be exercise. She could just go outside of her office building. I just wanted her to get sunshine. That relates to how sun affects our body clock and our hormones and so many things. But I just had her write yes or no. Did she get sunshine in the morning? And I expected some effect of that, but not nearly this drastic. So what we see on the left here is if she got sunshine in the morning, and again, we're just talking about going outside for 15-20 minutes, her afternoon energy levels were almost always a 4 or 5 out of 5. And if she didn't get sunshine, her afternoon energy levels were almost always a 1, 2, or 3. And the inverse for the craving. So if she was outside in the morning, her afternoon sugar cravings were almost always low. And if she wasn't, they're almost always high. So this to me is just so powerful. It's not something you would have gotten just by casual conversation, or it's definitely something she wouldn't have noticed, but by tracking. In this case, was it with a Google Doc, and then I've just plotted it using R. It's a really nice insight you can provide to someone. Here's another one where I had a guy. He's lost probably 20 or 30 kgs over time. This again in pounds, because we're from the U.S. But basically, I had him tracking. He would track his weight every day. And then what I did was I just plotted the days of the week, as you can see here, and his net change. So just the day, the change from today until tomorrow on each day. And obviously, as you can see, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, most of the time he's losing weight. Friday, Saturday, he's not losing weight. So that was a really good insight, because he might know, yeah, I kind of or just relax a little bit more on the weekend. But seeing like this, it's so powerful to say, wow, okay, we had if we clean up the weekends, we'll do a good job in kind of proceeding faster towards the goal. And then within day energy balance, I'll give you a bit of a brief background, because I think it's a really interesting topic and underappreciated. So if you imagine, throughout the whole day, we're constantly eating or exercising, and if we tracked minute by minute or hour by hour balance of our energy levels, we could see that you wake up, or overnight, your hourly balance is going to start decreasing. Especially if you exercise, you can create a big deficit, and then you eat breakfast and it comes up. So again, think of this as a running balance. But when we see these really big deficits, that's not ideal from a health standpoint, from a hormone standpoint. There's been a few studies that show essentially it's not the total daily calorie balance, but the within day balance that can have a really profound effect on, again, mostly hormones, reproductive function in females, some really important things that we don't want to ignore. So what I did was I made an app that can track that, and this is obviously a bit more complex, but it's been really cool, and I'll show you how it works. So what you can do, this is a publicly free available tool on a website. If you go to this website, it'll basically take you to this, and enter your body weight, your height, age, and sex, and then what it'll do is estimate this within day balance. So then you can put your calorie intake for each hour. So let's say you have 500 calories at breakfast, 500 calories at lunch, 500 calories at dinner, or an early dinner, let's say in the afternoon, and then 500 calories at dinner. And we can see the hourly balance is pretty good. The daily net balance is about 24 calories. Estimated daily energy expenditure is 1976, and we have this number of area below minus 300 calories. So basically, you want to avoid these really large deficits. So what happens, though, if you exercise, let's say someone does a fasted exercise session and burns 700 calories in the morning, well, all of a sudden, there's creating a pretty big deficit. Not only they're in a net negative for the day, but they're spending a lot of time in this red zone, and that number here shows up as this area. So what you might want to do in that case is have a bigger post-workout meal, and then maybe a little snack earlier. You're never going to completely avoid a deficit, but by minimizing this time spent in this zone, it's in theory should be helpful. And so that's an app you can play with. Feel free to go to that website. On the back, I have a little bit more info about how it's calculated, as well as some of the other apps I've made. Yeah. Now moving on. Research. How do I use technology in research? Well, there's been a few ways that have been, I think, pretty interesting. One is a survey I conducted, and it was really about the beliefs and practices related to pre-exercise nutrition. And it was answered by nearly 2,000 athletes in 57 countries. And that was really just due to the beauty of Twitter and email and kind of just, again, that kind of social media technology, Facebook, posting in groups, reaching out to coaches, and just circulating this survey that it only took about 10 minutes to complete. So the idea was just to really get a broad spectrum of athletes to respond. And so if you're curious, I won't go into the details of the results, but this published in 2 papers. One was focused on the fasted training, like how much people do it and what and why. Then there was another paper that was focused more on just kind of the overall nutrition habits and beliefs and how they vary by sex, competitive level, and diet. Now, another study I did, there's something called the 3-minute all-out test, and some of you might have heard about it. That's when you go into a lab, and as like the name sounds, you go as hard as you can for 3 minutes, and it gives you an indication of critical power. Well, we wanted to see if that was valid in remote settings, so we had 53 cyclists perform 2 of these tests, actually 3 because they had a familiarization, but in their home training environment, so on their home trainer. And then we had 10 come into the lab to perform some steady state trials to establish the true maximal metabolic steady state. Again, without worrying about too much of the details, the interest here is that a lot of people have these home trainer setups, and if this is a test coaches could use, it would be really, really good. We found that it was reliable in that, like we see in the picture here, that testing twice the same person, you're going to get very similar results, but it's not valid to give you the estimate of critical power, which is kind of the reason people do that test. So again, it was an interesting kind of experience, and kind of combining remote, social media based recruitment and then along with some in-lab stuff. And then finally, this last study I did as part of my PhD, and looking at really self-selected intake and training and day-to-day recovery, across long-term trainings. And the rationale is, we have all these things that can influence someone's day-to-day recovery and their training, so their overall energy intake and their carbohydrate intake, training volume, intensity, general life stress, their sleep. So all these things, and there's too many factors for a coach or just an individual brain to kind of sort through. So you can really harness the power of technology to put all these factors into the magic black box and get something out. Now that's a bit obviously, again, oversimplification, and it sounds reckless, but you get where I'm going with this. So what I did was I had 55 athletes track diet, training, sleep, stress, HRV for about 12 weeks. Some people were a little bit shorter for various reasons, and some people were a bit longer, but in all I ended up having nearly 4,400 days of dietary tracking and training. How we did that, using things like MyFitnessPal, Oura Ring ideally, or some people would use a Whoop strap or like a HRV for training app. And they would use Training Peaks as software, so that's where all of their training data would obviously come in through there. And they can also enter these metrics about sleep quality, how they felt, their life stress, soreness, things like that. And they can also use some of these scales to measure exercise. Here's a little bit more zoomed in. I use this perceived recovery status scale, so that's kind of a measure of how they felt in the morning. And another scale on the right, training feeling score, and they would use this would all be built into Training Peaks, so it would be, I'm connected with them through there, and so I have 70 athletes on my dashboard, and I can extract their data that way. And just to show you just a couple of the results, with this, we use this scale again, so on a 0 to 100, essentially how good do you feel in the morning. And here was predicted versus actual, so it's a lot of dots there, but each dot is a data point, and this is on unseen data. Basically, you train a model using one set of data, and then you can predict on unseen data to see how accurate it is. And it's fairly good. It's certainly better than guessing. When with those low scores, as you see on the bottom left, it's not super accurate, but generally, it's beneficial. And then we can see what factors. So there's essentially 300 or 400 variables that go into all these predictions between yesterday's sleep and 3 days ago sleep and your training and all these different things. You can see what has the biggest impact on the accuracy, and essentially how the person felt yesterday and how they wake up feeling as far as soreness and their sleep quality. Those are the three things that really have the biggest influence on the accuracy of predicting how someone's going to feel today. And then you can also take these top features and see, well, with all else being the same, how does your score change? So along the y-axis here we have this this PRS score. That's the perceived recovery status. Sorry, I should have explained that more clearly. And then for every score yesterday, as this goes up from 0 to 100, here's the value. The blue line is the value that we'd expect to see today. The gray lines are each of the individual data points, and the blue line are the averages of that. So as soreness goes up, we see today's recovery score go down, and so on. So that was a lot to get through, and I know I went kind of quickly, but hopefully that was interesting to you. Certainly can reach out via email with any questions or any follow-up, and I certainly appreciate your time.